Well, the difference a day makes. Yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg was lambasted in Brussels. Today, he's being wooed in Paris. The Facebook chief exec met President Macron ahead of a tech conference. The French president said he would press Zuckerberg on data privacy. He's also vying to bring Facebook's investment dollars to France. Now, while Macron is striving towards a new economy, old problems keep getting in the way. This is his vision. The vision of the CEOs of Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, Uber, and more. All at the Elysee Palace there. You have, of course, Satya Nadella, you have Zuckerberg, all there to talk. So it's quite an achievement to get these big guys at this summit. Macron has promised to turn France into Europe's startup nation. He wants to attract investment with faster growth, and he's tweaking employment laws to do it. For now, the statistics aren't cooperating. French unemployment actually ticked up to 9.2% in Q1. Now, think about it, 9.2%. The UK is about 4 point something, and the US is just under 3.9%. So 9% in France. Meanwhile, whilst all this goes on, the strikes, the reforms have had French people taken to the streets. Continuing nationwide strikes are threatening to bring France to a halt. It's a very different vision between, or the reality of the strikes and the unemployment, and the vision that he wants to create of the startup nation. Melissa Bell is in Paris for us. How do we square this circle between the reality and the vision?
It is a massive circle to square. As you say, the gap is enormous between the vision and what actually is. And yet, Richard, when you talk about, for instance, the slight hike in unemployment that we've seen since the beginning of 2018, what the economists here in France say is that that is the result of people getting back onto the jobs market because they believe after the fall in unemployment at the end of 2017 and the picking up of the French economy, that there may be jobs to be had. They simply hadn't been counted before. We'll probably have to wait a little more to see precisely whether the jury should be out on that, what the real result of that is, whether he has managed to fix things, whether he has managed with his reform to kickstart the French economy as he hopes to do. You mentioned the strikes. We are in the middle of a strike that has lasted now for many weeks, a strike of the rail workers. We saw yesterday the public service demonstrate, and we've seen successive strikes and protests over the course of the last few months because, Richard, his reforms have been as broad as they've been, and because they've been carried out at such a breakneck speed. France is simply not used to these sorts of reforms. In a sense, what you're seeing on the street is a protest to precisely where he's succeeding in changing France.
But, Melissa, how realistic is it for France to be a startup nation on a global tech industry when the first time anybody says, well, you should do it in English, or it has to be done to global standards, not the French way, everybody says, the glory of France, Zut Alors, no, it can't happen.
You know, it's a really good point, Richard, and that's historically been the problem of France. And yet, it occurred to me today as we waited outside the Elysee for this meeting, not just between Mark Zuckerberg and Emmanuel Macron to finish, but the meetings, a series of one-to-ones between the French president and a number of leaders of the tech giants of California. It occurred to me that this was the first time a French president had been able to have those meetings without a translator. That in itself is new. And you're right, there is this question of French regulations, there is this question of France's way of life, and there is this kickback. There is a part of French society that simply doesn't like the way that Emmanuel Macron is seeking to take this country. And yet, he has signaled his determination, and perhaps most crucially, Richard, he has the French public behind him. The latest polls show that most people here in France, a majority of them, believe that he will win. The rail strikers, also the other strikers, will lose, that he will see his reforms through. And that is perhaps what no other French president has had before. He's come into power with this written into his DNA. This is what he tried to do as economy minister, bring through reforms that hadn't been carried out. Now he's doing them as president, and he appears to have the public behind him.